Usually, when we think about modern entertainment today, whether you are looking at like a massive blockbuster movie or a huge pop stadium tour, there is this overwhelming, almost suffocating expectation of just, well, having more.
Oh, absolutely. The pressure is huge.
Right. I mean, we are talking about more flashing lights, more dramatic camera angles, multiple screens going off at once, nonstop jump scares.
Yeah.
It is as if the entire world is just screaming for your attention all at once.
Terrified that if there is a single second of silence, you are just going to look away.
Exactly.
It is basically a philosophy of total maximalism, a deliberate sensory assault that is designed to completely overwhelm your processing speed.
And honestly, it is so exhausting. But if you step away from that mainstream barrage and look into the world of underground European techno, that entire philosophy of more is more is completely inverted.
Completely upside down.
Right. We are talking about a massive cultural movement built entirely on the concept of stripping things away to find power in the absolute minimum. Which brings us to the source for our deep dive today.
Yeah, we have a really fantastic piece to discuss today.
We do. We are looking at this really fascinating music and culture column published by MMR, that is Monumental Movement Records, dated May 6, 2026. And the subject of the piece is the meteoric rise of the Belgian DJ and producer Amelie Lens.
And it is such an interesting case study.
It really is. But our mission today goes way beyond just decoding electronic music. We are going to explore how Amelie Lens redefined modern club culture through this framework of extreme hard minimalism.
Which is a brilliant concept.
It is. And more importantly, we're going to look at what her philosophy of stripping away can actually teach you about finding focus, intensity, and sustained flow in your own life, especially as we try to navigate this era of constant information overload.
To really understand the impact of what she is doing, though, you kind of have to visualize the environment she actually operates in.
Right. Set the stage for us.
Because if you are picturing, like, a stadium filled with pyrotechnics, massive LED video walls, and a DJ jumping on a table, you're definitely in the wrong genre.
Oh, completely the wrong genre.
Instead, picture a sleek, pitch-dark room. I mean, the only visual stimulus might be a single pulsing light, or maybe just the faint outline of a sound wave on a distant monitor somewhere.
It is just pure darkness.
Exactly, pure darkness. And that lack of visual imagery is so vital, because Amelie Lens didn't just become a popular DJ. Since the late 2010s, she fundamentally shifted the axis of modern techno by bringing the genre all the way back to its rawest roots.
Which the article describes as pure physicality, right?
Yes. The music is not acting as a soundtrack for some visual spectacle. Instead, the music is a physical force. It is the direct, visceral relationship between the low-end frequencies of a sound wave and the human body.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand how she got to a place where she could strip music down to that absolute bare-bones core, we have to look at the environment that produced her.
Right. Her background is super important here.
It is. She was born in Belgium in 1990. And for anyone familiar with electronic music, Belgium is not just a spot on the map. It is basically the fertile soil of European club culture. It has this massive, decades-long cultural accumulation of electronic history.
It is deeply ingrained in the culture there.
Exactly. But her entry into that world wasn't exactly what you might expect. I mean, she didn't start out as a reclusive audiophile locked in a basement tweaking analog synthesizers.
Not at all. What's fascinating here is that while she was always interested in the music, her early professional life was actually deeply immersed in fashion.
Wait, really? Fashion?
Yeah, she worked successfully as a fashion model for years before she decided to pivot seriously into DJing around 2014. And when she did, she was playing in these very small, incredibly gritty underground clubs in Antwerp and Brussels.
Man, that transition is just a staggering contradiction when you really think about the mechanics of those two worlds.
Oh, they are completely opposed.
Right. On one hand, you have fashion modeling, which is this highly visual, outward-facing industry where every single detail is about external decoration, the look, and the brand. You are hyper-visible.
You are the product being looked at.
Exactly. And she chose to leave that behind to step into a subterranean club scene that aggressively rejects visual decoration. She basically voluntarily walked out of total visibility and into total darkness.
And that recalibration of her artistic identity is the ultimate turning point of her career. Because when you walk into those small 200-person European techno clubs, you cannot rely on flashy gimmicks or a famous face.
They will see right through that.
Oh, instantly. The crowd in that environment is notoriously purist and highly skeptical of outsiders. The only way her early sets stood out was through the sheer precision of her track selection and the incredible psychological tension she created while mixing.
She had to prove instantly that she wasn't there to be looked at. She was there to make the room feel the sound.
Exactly. And earning that immediate, undeniable credibility required a very specific, uncompromising sonic palette. It is a style that is widely categorized now as hard minimalism.
Let's put that term under a microscope, actually, because hard minimalism sounds like an oxymoron to a lot of people.
It does sound like a contradiction at first.
Right. But when we break down the actual architecture of her tracks, as the MMR piece outlines, it is this exercise in extreme reduction. Her signature sound is supported by just 5 core pillars. You have the kick, the groove, the hi-hat, the bass line, and a hypnotic loop. And that is it.
It is remarkably sparse. All of the extraneous melodies, the complex chord progressions, the dramatic vocal solos that you might hear in other genres, they are entirely stripped away.
Just gone.
Completely gone. You are just left with those 5 elements working in tandem to create what the industry calls dance floor immersion.
But wait, 140 beats per minute sounds incredibly chaotic. How is that minimalist? I mean, if my heart is beating 140 times a minute, I'm in a state of sheer panic.
It sounds intense, yeah.
Right, so how does a tempo that aggressive not just devolve into a chaotic sensory overload?
That is the central paradox of her entire methodology, honestly.
Yeah.
The high BPM, combined with a low number of musical elements, is an incredibly deliberate feat of engineering.
Okay, so it is intentional.
Very intentional. It isn't an aggressive auditory assault meant to overwhelm the ears. The speed and the simplicity are engineered specifically to induce a trance state.
Ah, so because there isn't enough complex information to distract the brain?
The brain just surrenders.
Yeah.
Precisely. By strictly limiting the variables to just that kick drum, the groove, the hi-hat, the bass, and a single repeating loop, your brain eventually stops trying to process new melodic information.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you lock into the rhythm. The focus becomes entirely about sustainability and the purity of the sound, which draws the listener into a state of deep, continuous immersion.
It actually reminds me of the philosophy of a minimalist master chef. Like if you go to a restaurant and order a dish that has 30 different ingredients, the chef has a lot of room to hide their mistakes.
Oh, definitely. If a sauce is too salty, maybe the spice from a heavy garnish just covers it up.
Right. The complexity acts as camouflage. But if you order a dish with only 4 ingredients, say a perfectly seared scallop, a touch of butter, a squeeze of lemon, and sea salt, there is absolutely nowhere to hide. Every single component has to be universally flawless.
That is a perfect analogy, and Amelie Lens is doing exactly that, but with audio engineering.
Right.
Because if you only have 5 sonic elements playing out loud at a blistering 135 to 140 beats per minute, the precision has to be absolute. If the hi-hat is mixed even slightly too loud, or if the bass line frequencies clash with the kick drum,
The entire illusion shatters immediately.
instantly. And because her precision is so absolute, the psychological effect on the crowd changes. The listener isn't bracing for the next big chaotic shift or waiting for a massive distraction. They simply surrender to the momentum she is building.
And looking at the column, that momentum didn't stay confined to those dark basements in Brussels for long. By 2016, she was gaining major international acclaim through releases on premier European labels.
Her rise was incredibly fast.
It was. And by 2019, she was headlining the most massive techno festivals on the continent. We are talking about commanding crowds of tens of thousands of people at a time.
Which introduces a massive structural problem, if you think about it.
Oh, scaling it up.
Right. Intimacy and sustained tension work beautifully in a dark room with 200 people. But projecting hard minimalism to a sprawling festival crowd of 50,000 people in an open field, that is an entirely different beast.
Most artists adapt to that scale by leaning into the standard festival playbook, right?
Yeah, I do.
And we all know that playbook. The conventional wisdom for mainstream dance music is that you have to rely on the massive buildup and the explosive drop.
The big release.
Exactly. You create a void, the snare drum rolls faster, the synthesizer pitches way up, and then you just unleash every single sonic element at once to force the crowd to jump. It is a completely manufactured release of energy.
But Amelie Lens completely rejects that traditional structure. She doesn't utilize those massive buildups and drops at all. Her unique playstyle focuses entirely on maintaining a continuous, unyielding tension.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. How do you actually do that without the audience getting bored? I mean, if there is no big explosive release, how are 50,000 people staying engaged for a 2-hour set?
It comes down to micro adjustments. She is maximizing audience concentration through tiny changes. So instead of dropping the bass out completely for a full minute to create an artificial buildup, she might just slightly tweak the equalization.
Like almost imperceptible changes.
Exactly. She might slowly filter out the extreme low-end frequencies over the course of 30 seconds, and that creates this subtle physical yearning in the crowd's bodies, and then boom, she snaps it right back into place.
That is a masterful level of pacing. It really makes me compare those traditional festival drops to a cheap sugar rush. You eat the candy, you get the spike of energy, you jump around, but then you immediately crash.
And then you are just standing there waiting for the DJ to feed you the next piece of candy.
Right. You are completely dependent on the next spike.
Yeah.
But Amelie's sustained tension operates much more like a brilliant psychological thriller movie.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Yeah, think about it. A great director doesn't rely on cheap jump scares every 5 minutes to keep you watching. Instead, they slowly, methodically tighten the screws.
Right, building the atmosphere.
Exactly. They increase the atmospheric tension scene by scene using subtle lighting and pacing until you realize you have been holding your breath for 20 minutes and you physically cannot look away from the screen. She is executing that exact psychological technique, but she is doing it with sound waves to tens of thousands of people simultaneously.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the magnitude of her achievement becomes so clear. She proved that you don't need cheap structural tricks or visual fireworks to hold a massive crowd captive.
You just need absolute precision.
Exactly. She proved that hard, pure minimalism scales perfectly. By keeping those festival crowds locked in a singular, unified, almost meditative state, she demonstrated a profound level of crowd control that changed how promoters and other artists viewed the entire genre.
So what does this all mean for the industry? Because once you master the energy of a crowd on that scale, you transcend being just a performer on a stage. She realized the power she held and began using her platform to physically build the machinery that would shape the future of the scene.
She absolutely did. She made this deliberate transition from artist to architect. In 2018, she launched her own record label, Lensky.
But looking at how Lensky operates in the MMR article, it isn't just a vanity project where she releases her own tracks. It is mapped out as a highly functional ecosystem.
It is very structured.
Right. The flow essentially starts with Amelie Lens at the top, which feeds the visibility of the Lensky label. And then that visibility is used specifically to introduce new artists. Those new artists drive fresh releases, which ultimately results in scene expansion.
She uses her own gravity to pull others into orbit.
Exactly. And crucially, she bypassed the traditional media gatekeepers to do it. She didn't wait for electronic music magazines or radio stations to validate her sound or her artists.
She utilized social media and her massive live events to build a direct, unmediated connection with her fans. She proved the music worked on the dance floor, and that direct proof became her marketing.
It really makes me think of a modern business analogy.
Yeah.
She's not operating just as a musician anymore. She's functioning like a visionary tech CEO.
That is a really interesting way to look at it.
Well, think about it. She didn't just write a single successful piece of software, which would be like having a hit track. She built an open source platform. Lensky's the foundational operating system.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Right. And by bringing in these new artists, she is essentially inviting other brilliant coders to come in, use her minimalist framework, and build new applications on top of it. She created an entire environment where the scene could innovate.
This raises an important question about what it actually takes to be a defining artist today, because honestly, making incredible tracks is just the baseline requirement now.
It is the bare minimum.
Exactly. To truly define an era, you have to curate an ecosystem. Her personal aesthetic of hard, uncompromising techno successfully turned into the mainstream standard for the entire scene. By proving that minimal, heavy sounds could absolutely dominate global festival stages, she prompted countless other producers and DJs to adopt her methodology.
And there is also a distinct point to be made about how her success is perceived within the culture itself. The broader media often contextualizes her story around the fact that she is a highly successful female DJ operating in an industry that has historically been heavily male-dominated.
Right, which is an important narrative in the mainstream press.
It is. But within the actual techno community, Her acclaim and the massive respect she commands are rooted strictly in her musical prowess.
It is a true meritocracy of sound.
Absolutely.
The underground scene does not follow an artist simply because of a compelling media narrative or market positioning. They follow her because the kick drums are perfectly engineered, the track selection is flawless, and the tension she creates in a room is just undeniable.
The music speaks for itself.
Yes. The raw credibility she earned in those small basements back in 2014 remains the unshakable foundation of her global platform today.
It perfectly brings the whole conversation full circle, honestly. The grand takeaway from observing Amelie Lens's trajectory in this MMR column is how she took the deeply historical functionality of Techno column, that raw, physical connection to a repetitive beat that started in the basements of the 80s and 90s, and fused it with this incredible modern refinement.
She looked at an entertainment landscape that was becoming increasingly bloated, constantly reliant on overwhelming visual gimmicks and cheap emotional manipulation, and she simply said, no.
Just a hard no.
Yeah. She cut out the excess noise and focused intensely on the pure essence of the sound itself. And in an era that is completely plagued by constant information overload, her approach feels incredibly fresh. It is remarkably persuasive.
And that is exactly why her philosophy matters to you listening to us right now, even if you never plan on stepping foot inside a techno club.
Oh, it applies everywhere.
It really does. Think about your daily life. Whether you are prepping a complex presentation for a corporate meeting, trying to learn a difficult new skill, or simply attempting to organize your schedule, we are constantly bombarding ourselves with decorations.
We convince ourselves that we need more tools to be productive. Like, we need 10 different software applications open, 3 different monitors, a smartwatch buzzing our wrists, and a constant stream of background media just to function.
It is just too much.
Yeah.
But Amelie's music serves as this powerful auditory reminder of the sheer force of unbroken concentration.
Yes, the focus is the key.
The ultimate lesson here is that true strength and true impact are so often reached not by adding more elements, but by fiercely stripping away the unnecessary. It is about having the quiet confidence to let the core elements of your work or your focus stand entirely on their own without hiding them behind a wall of chaotic noise.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over today as you get back to your routine.
What should they be thinking about?
Well, if Amelie Lens can hold 50,000 people in a hypnotic, unwavering trance simply by removing excess noise and sustaining tension, what excess decorations or cheap sugar rush distractions could you strip away in your own life? What would happen if you finally removed the clutter and allowed yourself to unlock that level of powerful, sustained flow?
Man, it definitely makes you want to close a few of those open tabs in your brain.
Absolutely.
Just find that single pulsing light in the dark room, strip away the noise, and lock in. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the architecture of modern techno and the incredible power of hard minimalism. We hope you walk away feeling more focused, more grounded, and ready to cut through the clutter. Until next time, keep digging deeper.